All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for VLP's March webinar on generational wealth conversations with Vic Rohe. My name is Andrew Fincher, and I'm an advisor here at VLP. If you're attending one of our webinars for the first time, welcome, and thanks for tuning in. For those returning, welcome back, and thank you for your continued trust in our firm. VLP is a financial planning and wealth management firm located in Vienna, Virginia, and we work with clients nationwide. Our goal is to be a trusted partner with the individuals, families, and businesses we serve to help them determine what live greater means to them. In the last 25 years, we've grown from a two-person firm to a team of 21, which includes 7 certified financial planners, 5 accredited investment fiduciaries, 2 chartered financial analysts, and a certified divorce financial analyst. Today, our advisors have a collective experience of over 100 years. I'm joined by Vic Rohe, a senior regional consultant with MFS Investments, to discuss why family wealth transfers can fail, how to avoid mistakes, and how open communication between family members may lead to successful transfers of wealth. With that being said, Vic, I'll turn it over to you.
Go for it, buddy.
There we go. How about a little bit? All right, here we go. Thanks, everyone, for being on the call today. As mentioned, I'm Vic Rohe. I'm with MFS, based out of McLean, Virginia. And I was asked today to come on and talk to you about a topic that is a tough topic. Not a lot of people like to talk about the end of their life cycle or the end of the life cycle of their loved ones. But nonetheless, it's an important topic, understanding basically why wealth transfers fail or how to have success with the wealth transfer. Depending on your age, if your parents are still alive, you may be in position to receive a wealth transfer, and you may get an education in that when that day occurs. Or if you have children, you may be potentially looking at participating in a wealth transfer. And so the purpose of today is to really discuss the 5 key themes that make sense, understanding of why wealth transfers sometimes don't go the way they're planned, and then how to be a better planner when it comes to understanding the importance of setting things up in advance. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the agenda. So first thing we're going to do is once again, we're going to understand what is failure. What does it mean to fail? And we'll define that and walk through some of the key points. Then we're going to talk about what is a plan, how to put a plan in place, how does it look, and how to communicate that plan, which is going to be the last part, and why that is so important going forward. So first thing is defining failure. So it's understood that when you want to leave something to your loved ones or your heirs, or you want to possibly receive something from a loved one or a parent, the idea behind it is that unintended consequences or people that you didn't intend to receive part of your estate get involved, that's a failure. So the first one that you're probably thinking of is tax efficiency. If you wind up transferring money, let's say $100,000 for simplicity, but it gets caught up in the tax situation, you wind up basically giving away 60,000, the government gets 40, you might consider that to be a failure. So we'll talk about ways to set things up properly so they can be as efficient as possible from a tax perspective. The other way, of course, unintended consequences, that you wind up paying the court system and a lot of lawyers and get involved in what we call probate. And you can imagine because of 2020 and COVID and the general issues with the court systems, that is a long, lengthy process. If anyone on the call has been involved through a probate process, you know it's not the greatest experience. It creates a lot of stress on your loved ones and yourself. And so that is something that everyone's going to look to avoid as well, because if you get caught in the court system, it's probably seen as what we consider to be a failure. Also, infighting. The intention for most people is not to create problems with their family upon their passing. They're trying to solve problems and create solutions, not create infighting. And we'll talk about some of the ways that occurs a little bit later in this presentation, but that would be seen as somewhat of a failure. And then the last part is the inheritance. Most people see wealth transfer as the chance to create a better life, not just for their children or friends, whoever the beneficiaries are, but they kind of envision it lasting longer, right? But the problem is, statistically, that is not the case, and we'll get into that as well. So first thing you have to do is consider why you need a plan. So not having a plan is the number one way to fail, as you would imagine. About 50% of Americans don't even have a will, and far less have a trust. And so the very first rule is, creating some type of plan would be the first key to success. If you don't, then it's obviously going to probably likely wind up in some of the situations we just discussed or be in failure. So what are the things you're going to look at? Though the first one you're going to think about, of course, is probably something like a will. Very simply put, you can take out a piece of paper, write down your wishes, and you can kind of keep that somewhere, or if you get more sophisticated, you can file that with the county that you're in. But realistically, having a will and a document that dictates what you hope to happen upon your passing is a very crucial thing. It creates guidance not only for the family, but also from a legal perspective of where things are supposed to go. It's a pretty simple thing to do. Like I said, there's a lot of online applications today you can go to, like LegalZoom and things of that nature, or you can hire a lawyer as well. But for the most part, it's probably the simplest step to take, but most people don't do it because they always envision the same thing, which I'm a great procrastinator, and that is, I'll do it later, I have more time. No one ever envisions the fact that that timeline can get shorter and shorter quicker than you would expect. And so this is the number one way and biggest mistake that we see. So the second thing I mentioned earlier was the word of a trust. And so a trust, where a will can be made public, right, and be put on the county records and be pulled up by somebody else. A trust, however, is not. And so a trust is a document that obviously is a little more in depth. It costs a little bit more money to get and definitely involve more of an attorney process in most cases. But it's not just the idea of privacy that you want to use a trust. The idea between a trust is it gives you more control historically upon your passing. And so examples that we see, people create trusts. So let's say you have younger children and you don't believe that their maturity level will be good enough or higher level when you pass away, and you have an idea that you want to control how the distributions come out. So an example would be not until they're 35 years old do they get a certain portion of the inheritance, and so on and so forth. Maybe you have a special needs child and you need to appoint a caretaker and things of this nature. But a trust is a very useful document and a very important way to kind of control it and understand how to transfer wealth effectively. And so that is probably the best way to do it historically, if you want to have more control, as we say, from beyond the grave. And then the other part is power of attorney. So this is a two-part system. One power of attorney can be made for later in life when you may have more difficulties. And you want power of attorney for really two things. One may be considered to be medical. So who's going to make your medical decisions? And then who's going to make your financial decisions? In my household, my parents had two children. I have a sister. We're Irish twins. And in my household, it's a two-part system. I am very pragmatic, and therefore I wind up with the financial responsibilities. But my sister is obviously more loving, and she's probably more on top of the medical portions of it. And so realistically, you may be two children in some scenarios, but usually it's not the same person. But if you only have one child or one trusted source, it may be one person. But it's very important to understand to make that decision now, because should something happen where you become incapacitated, you're going to want to make sure that you have someone in control of that situation. So realistically speaking, the first thing that you suffer from is not making a plan. That is the biggest mistake you can make. So wills, trusts, power of attorneys, these are some of the crucial things that you'll have to decide to do. And I would encourage you sooner the better. That's probably the biggest mistake that we're always going to see, is not planning. So the second part about this is you create a plan, you go through the process, you do all the right things. You set up your trust, you got your will, you got everything you're going to need. But then you don't share the plan. And so what do I mean by share the plan? So there are many facets to a plan that exists. So for example, you have the will, you have the trust. My question is, where is it? Where'd you put it? Okay, and now you know where it is. Now my question is, great, who'd you tell? Who has access to it? Who knows that if something happens, go to this location? And so in my life, I'll give you a couple of examples. One is a sad example from a friend of mine, and another one of kind of how I handled this situation. So I had a good friend of mine, unfortunately, he passed away of cancer now about 10 years ago. And he was in the financial industry like myself. And we went through all the painstaking things like this. And it was one of these things where it was a longer process, but he did die suddenly, unfortunately. But we had gone through and all the important things to do, and he did everything. He just made one crucial mistake. And I didn't catch it, and unfortunately, I made assumptions that he told other people this. But he had everything from his will and all legal documents to where the car registrations and titles, everything you can think of financially. He did it all right, and he put it on his laptop. And I think you'll probably figure out the punchline, to which only he had the password. And so I never thought to say, who else has the password? It never dawned on me. And so it had a profound effect on me because his widow was very upset. And I remember saying, we've done all these things, but we didn't have access to a lot of the things. Some of the things we had in hard copy, but realistically, it was a bigger, more stressful process than it needed to be because he didn't share a simple part of the plan. So what did I take away from that? So there are several things I do. I keep a lot of hard documents in a safe I have in my house. And my wife has this combination, but she doesn't get in there often. And so it's probably something she may forget. So what I did was I took a photo of something that we cherish, and I put the combination on the back, and she'll know that if something happens and she can't remember, to go to this photo. I also took a photo of a good friend of mine, the best man in my wedding, and I mailed it to him. It was one of when we were younger. On the back of that photo, he lives on the West Coast. I put the combination to my safe and said, should something occur, please, remember that this is on the back, and support my spouse in this scenario, or whomever may need access to this in the future. And so creating a plan is the first step, but you have to share it. You have to let people know where things are. And often you have to remember, you have to update that as time goes on. Should my trusted contact or somebody that I count on not be there in the future, I need to then make sure I understand I have to give somebody else that responsibility. So remember, it's a very sad and emotional time period. Making it easy for those people who have to then move forward is the best thing to do. So never forget that it's important to create the plan, but it's just as important to share it and make sure that key people are involved to make sure that you can follow through with what you intend. All right. So I mentioned already the word update in my conversation, which was basically if something happens to my key contact. But there are many things that happen throughout your life where you need to update a plan. So you go through, you did the responsible thing, you got the right people involved, and now the problem is you didn't update it. So what's a good rule of thumb? So the first good rule of thumb is you want to sit back and you want to update your plan about once every 3 to 5 years. You want to make sure that if things are evolving in your life, maybe your assets are growing, maybe you buy a home or you sell a home or things are going on. So you want to make sure that everything's really current for your current lifestyle. But the biggest mistakes that we see that people don't address. So I grew up in New York. And New York, if I set up my plan in New York originally, and now I moved to Virginia, what you have to understand is that estate planning is a state thing. And so every state has a different set of rules, and they may be similar or they may be different. But if you move when you retire, or you move location to be closer to your grandchildren, then at that point in time, the right thing to do is to update your plan. And what you want to do is take your existing plan to maybe a local attorney to make sure that your plan is set up for their rules. Simply, state taxes in New Jersey will always probably be the most famous estate tax place that probably has the highest penalty for states. And so if you're set up for New Jersey and you live in Florida, you want to make an adjustment, or vice versa. And so if you're moving locations, and even if it's assisted living facility in a different state, especially around here in the DMV, you might cross the border into Maryland. You want to make sure that you're set up for success, and your plan has been updated for those state laws. And so that's one way. The other way, of course, is if you've changed spouses. So divorce happens, happening later in life as time goes on, and we're seeing more and more. But the documents that you sign, and particularly the forms that you've signed when you were younger, come into play here. So I'll give you an example. One of the most famous court cases ever heard was here out of Tyson's Corner. It was a local. And what happened was someone had gotten married in their younger days. had a life insurance policy, had an IRA as a young person, and then got divorced at a young age, and then remarried and had a new spouse for 25 years, children, the whole thing. And then had a will and had all these documents in place, but then passed away. And then upon the passing, what they figured out was that, of course, the original IRA and the original life insurance policy for that he had the ex-spouse on it. And so even though there were documentation indicating that he would like his current family to get all the assets, and he went through the process, the problem was he never changed the names on the original documents that he signed. And so what occurred was obviously a big lawsuit back and forth between the ex-wife and the family, and it made it all the way to the Supreme Court, ironically enough. And so the question was, which document would win out overall, the one that he did later in life where he had the intent on the will, or the original document that he signed in the beginning. And what happened basically was that the ex-wife won. And so if you don't update everything, and I mean everything, as time moves on, whoever's on some of these original documents will be entitled to inherit what that was. And although at the time it wasn't a lot of money and probably an afterthought in the divorce proceedings many years ago, it grew to quite a bit of money and created this big rift. And so once again, an unintended consequence. So if you do get remarried and you have to go back, you want to make sure you go back on all of your assets and all of your documents. That's where a great financial planner like VLP can definitely help you make sure you have all those ducks in a row. And then the last one I'll mention updating the plan is children. So if you have children, it's in the beginning, you were responsible, you set up your plan, you had a child, and you make that maybe your spouse, your beneficiary, and the child is successor beneficiary. And you wind up creating the plan, and then you have other children, but you never update the plan. And life goes on, and you're worried about everything else, and you forget all about it because you said, I already have a plan, it's already in place. And then what happens upon your passing is maybe it goes to your spouse, or maybe your spouse passes away first. And so now you're going to go to your successors. And the problem is you have 3 children, but there's only one on the dotted line. Well, let me explain to you what happens. Your assets transfer to that one child. Now, I know what you're thinking. I hope my children would be nice enough to understand that I intended to give it to all of them and they'll split up equally, but that's not legally what's going to happen. So as you have more children, or maybe it's grandchildren you're going to leave and you're going to put into, and you have more grandchildren, you have to go and update your plan. If you do not, that will actually create a situation where it will leave some people out, maybe an unintended consequence. So updating the plan becomes a crucial part. So creating one, important. Communicating one, very important. But updating it is just as important, because what may happen is if you don't update it, it will give unintended consequences and really kind of change your intentions overall. Okay, so the other thing we see is not being specific enough. And so this creates a lot of family infighting. So the example would be, I want you to think of something in your life that you cherish, that you were given or you inherited from somebody. And if there were siblings involved or not. But it could be a painting. It could be a religious thing. Could be like a crucifix or rosary beads, or it could be a classic car. It could be anything that you said, I really cherish these memories with so-and-so, and I'm very happy that I got it. Well, if you have people in your life, particularly children, there are things that they cherish, things that they are going to remember. It could be a wedding ring, as a good example. In this case, let's say my mother's wedding ring is a topic, and so there are emotional ties to things. You have to be very specific when you decide what you're going to do with your assets, because if you just pass away, what you're going to see, and you might have seen this before, it creates kind of a problem. This is where infighting starts. Mom would have wanted me to have this, or hey, Dad and I did more of this, and I want that car, or whatever the infighting is going to be. So it's very difficult. I've seen this done a number of different ways. I was recently out in Idaho at a friend's home, and they have 3 children, and they are they're very great. They're very considerate and great people, and so we had asked them that question. So like, how is it set up? And what they did was something very interesting, kind of like an NFL draft style approach. What I mean by that is what they did was they decided that they would basically let the oldest pick first from all the items that they figured that they would want, and then let the next person pick, and so on and so forth. And they basically put that down in the will and said, this is how it's going to be. But being specific is very important, because what it does is it gives them closure. It says, I would like so-and-so to have this because. And so it doesn't leave any mystery, and it limits a lot of the infighting that is potentially going to occur should you pass away. And so maybe a way to track that as a very simple system that we have here is just a quick sheet of, hey, who do I want to make sure I give some things to that mean they're important to me and that mean something to me. And I'm going to go ahead and put them down and say, here's the items. So for example, maybe once again, it's my son, Jack, who gets, my cherished, 1960 sports car, or whatever it is. And then my daughter gets, the wedding ring and this painting because it means so much to me, and so on and so forth. But as time goes on, you'll see the word parents on here and things of that nature. As people start to, unfortunately pass away, you may have to adjust this as well. So this is also something that should be updated over time as life goes on. But it's important to tell people why. And I can't stress that enough, because it really gives closure and understanding to what the meaning of the gift is. Okay, so this is the picture, I like to say, of the worst possible scenario for family infighting in the history of estate planning. And what this is a symbol of is basically the vacation home. As lovely as vacation homes are, and the memories that are created are amazing, part of the greatest infighting in history will occur on this. And so it's pretty simple to imagine, but imagine if you have 3 children. And let's just say you grew up here in the DMV area where I'm at, outside of DC, and one child moves to New York, one lives in California, and one lives here locally, somewhere in the DMV area. And you leave your children the home at which you built so many memories on, let's just say somewhere out in, I don't know, Rehoboth, or somewhere out in Delaware Beach. And it's a beautiful gift, and you have nothing but the best intentions, because all you envision in your life is that they will carry on and have beautiful memories like you had with their children, and so on and so forth. And the problem is this: who gets to use it, when, who has to spend money to update it, who wants to repaint the color of the walls, so on and so forth. And so what happens is one child generally gets to use it more than others. But if they need a new roof, who's paying for the new roof? Are they all 3 going to pay in equally, and so on and so forth? And you can kind of see how this starts to go. So as you see, it doesn't wind up being used equally, and the expenses will be looked at pretty crucially, and who's spending on what. And the infighting is infamous on this. I was actually in an exotic island one time. A friend of mine has a place called Roatan, which is off of Honduras. And the house next door was a very interesting house. And I said, what's going on with this house? And he said, oh, that's been an infighting in a family for like 30 years. And they refuse to do anything with it. They won't repair it, but they also won't sell it. So very interesting outcome. But if this is your intention, this is where a trust is going to come into play. A trust will become a bigger part of what's going to go on here. If you intend on leaving it, you may want to leave the resources to support it, and so on and so forth, and the documentation around it. But if not, then maybe the best case scenario is to sell it and then redistribute the assets as you see fit. But just understand that best intentions are one thing, but realistic outcomes are another. So really consider, when you do consider what you want to pass along as assets, that you understand all the potential consequences, because the last thing you want to do is create family infighting with your gift. Okay, so on to an interesting tool that's out there called the Family Love Letter. Family Love Letter is really a kind of a personal thing that's out there, that you can write your intentions of things that you want to occur in your life. And so this is where you're going to put in, my wishes to stay in my home, why this is the case. If I'm not able to stay in my home, what am I looking to accomplish? and all of these things. In case of my parents, I have one of my father would like to be buried, my mother would like to be cremated. And this is where we kind of write all that down. Now that could also be in a will, but this is going to be the more emotional part of why. So this are my wishes, and here's why. And so this is your chance to basically communicate at some point why your wishes and why you felt this way at that time and what you wish to occur. But it also, once again, I think this is an important part of this conversation. It has to do with closure and understanding why you're doing what you're doing. Because once again, it leaves less for people to argue over or get involved in. And then the final thing that I'll mention here, we talked about kind of, once again, the plan and updating the plan and communications and all that and being specific. But the average inheritance lasts as long as the average amount of a lottery winner gets in time, which is 18 months. So regardless of how much money you leave, the math doesn't necessarily change. The average inheritance or lottery winning lasts 18 months. The number one thing purchased from a lottery winner or an person that inherits money, the number one item, the very first thing, is a brand new car. I don't know why, but people feel the need to make that decision. What is not happening in most scenarios is they are not creating legacy wealth. What that means is that they are not investing it or leaving it the way you intended. They are basically using it almost right away. Today, we see a lot of people going right to paying off debt and things of that nature. So overall, what I would tell you is that you need to prepare your beneficiaries to inherit wealth. It means that you have to have a conversation. I understand what you're saying. You're saying to yourself, well, I don't want my children to be less. I don't want the person to wait around for me to die. I want them to reach full potential. And we totally understand that. But at the same time, not everybody is great with money. And so there's a couple of ways, and I know this is an awkward conversation. We like to say money is right up there. If you look talking to people as basically right above sex, and you'd rather talk to them about religion, wishes upon death, or politics, or health issues before you'd rather have these awkward conversations about money. But it's a very important conversation. If you're not comfortable having it, this is a great way to bring in your financial advisor. And then I would just mention in the end that there are some resources that you can get them. These are some great books that are out there that we can follow up with you on that basically just help people understand when you inherit money, what are the best ways to go forward to make sure that that money lasts longer and can give them more security throughout time. And then hopefully at some point, maybe even do it well enough to then pass it along to another generation. But it's a very important topic that people need to understand that you need to get people ready to inherit money. People who haven't had a lot of money or aren't used to getting large cash influxions into their life may not do as well with it and may choose to make rash decisions. And so if you wish better for that, then you need to prepare them a little bit, maybe a few gift ideas, a few books, or a couple conversations about your intentions and what you're hoping they'll do with it will go a long way. So with that, I've gone on probably a little too long. We've kind of gone through it all. Are there any questions that I can answer for you all in regards to these topics?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Vic. If anyone has questions, please put it in the chat. I'll read it off and Vic can answer.
It was very informative. Thank you very much.
You got it, Ray.
Looks like we had a question come in here. Is it still advised to use bank security boxes if you don't have a home safe?
Yeah, great question. So very important topic here. There's two things you mentioned on banking. One is same thing with your checking accounts, especially if you have a spouse. If you do not have the right forms filled out, when you pass away, I've seen this several times, unfortunately, once in my personal life. We'll talk about the bank account first. If you don't have someone there on transfer on death, and you basically, the bank account, the moment someone passed away, shuts down. You have access, zero access to that almost immediately. And so first thing is make sure your bank accounts, for those who you're hoping to kind of help you with the process of going through your burial, et cetera, has access to that. That is not given just because you say, hey, I was married to so-and-so. That doesn't happen. So you have to make sure you have the right forms there. But the second one is, if you do not have someone set up on that safety deposit box, first is where are the keys, and then who has access to it. You have to give them access to it at the bank. That is a legal proceeding. You will have to go through court and get a whole bunch of things done just to get access to that box. So you can still use them. They're getting harder to find. I had one. They closed the branch and they shut it down. But if you do have one, once again, who is your trusted contact person? Who's named on it to access that box? And do they know where the key is? Very crucial. If not, this will become a process that will take a lot longer than you may intend. So if you have all your special documents in that box, somebody, a trusted contact or two, better have access to help you deal with this, because otherwise it's going to be a long process. Great question.
Perfect. So a couple more questions just came in here. We're looking to include the grandkids in our will. Any thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. I mean, if a trust may be, I don't know how old your grandkids are. So let's assume that they're under 18, or maybe they're not. But the idea is that you know the idea of how responsible people are and what you want to do. But grandkids are a great way to kind of get them going. It could be as a 529 or something college intended, unless we see a lot of that on my side, or it could be something more specific. But absolutely, you can include them. But remember, if they're younger and you think they're going to remain relatively younger, you may want to use a trust to kind of give them these gifts. So maybe on 18th birthday. So I know people that give money on birthdays for grandkids for like 40 years. And it's like, on whatever this account is worth, give them 1x of this account in the future on their birthday. So the idea is that they know you're thinking about them even beyond the grave for a long period of time. It's a nice way to do it. But once again, a trust might be a better way to do it. But absolutely, grandkids can be included.
And that's a great point. I would just add to that, always speak with your estate planning attorney. Depending on how it's structured, there could be generation skipping provisions tied into that. So that's an important part to consider.
Tax efficiency.
Um, so another question, what are the advantages, disadvantages to having someone in Virginia, same state as the executor?
I don't think there's any advantage or disadvantages necessarily. I mean, the only advantage may be maybe they hopefully maybe they're more familiar with the Virginia laws in that case. But if it's it's really about a trusted person, right? And when it comes to that, so as long as you feel this person has your best interests in mind, and if it's someone in the legal profession, then certainly they would certainly know their state law better than most other states. In this area, I don't know any attorneys in Northern Virginia that aren't pretty familiar with Maryland laws, mainly because it's synonymous. We're all kind of walking around the same spot, but it's not as crucial, but it may have a little bit of an advantage.
Perfect. Do you know of a standard checklist for planning and communicating the plan, maybe a book or something else?
Yeah. So the I'll send out after this. I'll send over part of the checklist that we have, but we do have a checklist, several checklists on different things. But the idea behind it is we'll send you kind of a little worksheet that goes with this, and I'll have that sent out to you. But we do have a little something that helps you kind of walk through the things that we talked about.
What about trustees' fees? Can you discuss how much they might be?
That I don't know. So unfortunately, every place is a little different, and I don't know, where everybody is. But I haven't heard of anyone saying that it wasn't worth the money. So as long as you're working with somebody good, like anything else, right? You're working with a great financial advisor, you're working with great professionals. They should be worth their weight in gold, so to speak. If they're doing everything right and they can save you money on taxes and save probate and all the mistakes that we just discussed, there's a huge value to that. And so I don't know what the specific fees are, but I would say to you, think about some of the things we talked about today and weigh out what you think it's worth. But it's probably my experience has been they're worth them weight in gold. So I would say, obviously every place is different, but I would say definitely spend it. It's my advice.
Looks like the last question we have here. What form is the best to pass on assets to family, investments versus houses versus other?
So, all right. Generally investments are pretty good. And the reason for it is usually there's a cost step up in basis. So if you made, let's say, let me pick out a stock that no one's ever heard of, like Nvidia. Let's just say it went up a lot, and you know, you have a huge cost basis in that, which means that you have a huge tax bill if you sell it. When you pass away, that you get to reset the cost basis, and so it goes to the person that inherited it basically at the price that you passed away at. And so that is very efficient. Homes, on the other hand, once again, it's one thing if they're going to live in it. If they're not, there's going to be a lot of expenses involved with that. They've got to maintain a property, they may have to fix it up to sell it. You got realtor fees. So generally, I would say securities and cash, of course, tend to be the easiest way because basically it's electronic and fairly simple to do. The second thing I think it's important is that they're in something, they've seen something grow. And it gives them a chance to talk to your advisor and understand the power of investing. And maybe they hold it. And we do see that a lot. People will hold what they're given, and that may give them a chance to grow this wealth over time, maybe enough so that they can even pass it on from there. So I would say in general, investments seem to be one of the easiest and most effective ways to pass along assets. But you know, I'm sure cash is equivalent to that. And then homes seem to be a little bit more difficult because there are more moving parts.
That's a great point. And I'd add to that as well. That could be a very specialized topic depending on your personal situation. So, Will, I recommend that you speak with your advisor and your estate attorney together and kind of strategize how that's going to best fit for you. But that's all the questions that we have today. So, Vic, I want to thank you. This was an incredibly important topic, and that was very informative. So, thank you for taking the time. I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Again, if you have any questions on this stuff, please reach out to your VLP advisor. We're more than happy to help and can answer any questions. Thank you again, and have a great week.
Appreciate you.
That was very helpful. It filled in a few holes that we're just sitting on.